I invite the member for Abbotsford West to lead the House in prayer or reflection.
Gracious God and Heavenly Father, worthy are you, O Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. We come boldly before your throne this morning. We need your mercy. We need your grace in our lives. As the events of this day unfold, we ask for your guidance. We ask for your wisdom. We ask for your presence in this house. And we ask that you guide us in our deliberations today. We are also very mindful of the member from Victoria Beacon Hill today. And we ask for your healing and full restoration to her body. We ask for your peace and strength for her and for her loved ones this day. Thank you that you hear our prayers. And I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Introductions by members. Minister of Health.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce 5 representatives from the Hospital Employees Union who are joining us in the gallery today. And they are President Barb Netterpel, Care Aides Victoria Harper, Jenny Raitan, and Dolly Bulalaka, and Nurse Joanne Safstrom. The Hospital Employees Union is the biggest healthcare union here in British Columbia with more than 60,000 members, Honourable Speaker, and since 1944, the HEU has been advocating for these members, valuable members of our healthcare system here in BC. I'm so grateful for all the work that they do. Looking forward to meeting with them after today's question period, and I'd ask the House to please make them feel very welcome here today.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I don't often get a chance to do introductions from people coming down this riding, especially for my wife. Kim Royal's here today to visiting in the chamber. It's great to be able to have her down here. I wish she could come down all the time, but you know, somebody else has to make sure that Bjarty's looked after at home, so she does a good job for me there. In any case, would the House please make her welcome?
Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I have 2 introductions, and the first is I am very pleased to introduce a large delegation in the gallery from Métis Nation, BC, led by Walter Minot, who is the new president of Métis Nation, BC, and I'd like to send my congratulations again to Walter and my appreciation for the time that we've had to spend together. I know you had a busy, packed few days of meetings, but glad to have you here. Will the House please join me in making sure they feel welcome? And second, I just want to make sure it's on everyone's minds. A powerful documentary called Sugarcane, filmed in BC, is nominated for an Oscar this weekend on Sunday. It's an incredible tribute to the resilience of Indigenous communities, First Nations communities in BC, and particularly a number of powerful leaders from Williams Lake, who did an incredible job telling this personal story and lifting up the intergenerational impacts of residential schools and the power of community and culture in bringing people together to do that healing. So I hope as folks are watching the Oscars, you're thinking about the importance of that story and rooting on local filmmakers and the incredible film and television sector here, as well as First Nations and Indigenous leaders doing that important healing. Thanks.
House Leader of the Third Party.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to welcome the British Columbia Black History Awareness Society, a non-profit organization formed in 1994 to celebrate the historical and contemporary achievements and contributions of persons of African ancestry to BC and Canada. Jamila Duhayabi is the Executive Director of the British Columbia Black History Awareness Society. Through her work, Jamila engages the community on the importance of Black history and on celebrating the past, present, and future contributions of Black people in this province. Please join me in welcoming Jamila and the BC Black History Awareness Society to the Legislature.
Member for Boundaries, Milkameen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome two members from my community of Karamias. Christina Quadflag is my executive assistant and is here today to join us, and as well as my closest friend, Kathy Burke. And she's been there for many of an adventure, so thank you. Please make them feel welcome.
Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I see in the gallery that Neil Moody and Jenny Scott are here from the Canadian Home Builders Association. They do fantastic work to help us increase housing supply, address the challenges we're seeing in our housing crisis. I want to welcome them to the House, and I hope they have good meetings with members in this building.
Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Sometime in the last week or so, my grandmother turned 95 years old. Now, I say sometime in the last week or so because she actually tracks her birthday by the lunar calendar, and I never learned to read it. So would the House please join me in wishing my grandmother a 95th birthday?
Member for Columbia River Revelstoke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just want to echo the Minister's congratulations and welcome to the Métis Nation BC delegation that's here. I really look forward to meeting with you this afternoon. I did want to draw attention to one executive member specifically, and that's Ms. Deb Fisher, Region 4 Director. There's not a person in the Columbia Valley affiliated with education who doesn't know the great work that Deborah's done for nearly 30 years working with Indigenous youth. Her and her husband Ken have fostered 35 children into their home over the last several decades, and everybody in Columbia River Revelstoke knows Deborah and just has a special place in their heart. So Deborah, it's just wonderful to see you here today. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to meeting with you later. Thank you, everybody.
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Today is a special day in my ministry office. Today is Desmond Pollard's birthday. Desmond is my Chief of Staff, and he has provided me with exceptional support in my new role, as he is also providing exceptional support to my colleague from Beacon Hill. And so we both want to wish him a very happy birthday today. He works tirelessly for children and youth in this province, and I want to recognize him as just the wonderful human being he is. Happy birthday, Desmond.
Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills. Statements by members.
Member for Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to pay tribute to the Delta Police Pipe Band. This January, I had the opportunity to attend the Pipe Band's 49th annual Robbie Burns dinner. It was a night full of incredible food, music, and dancing, and the whole experience made me want to devote these 2 minutes to them. The band was established in 1971 by members of the Delta Police Department and has grown to include 25 pipers and 12 drummers. The band, under the direction of Pipe Major Corey Tillier and Drum Major Mo Cole, takes the lead position in many parades and special events in Delta and Richmond throughout the year. This February, the band was at BC Place, where they, along with 350 other pipers and drummers, played for the opening ceremonies of the Invictus Games. That wasn't the first time this band has played for a stadium full of people alongside musical royalty, though, Mr. Speaker. Somewhat famously now, the Delta Police Band played alongside Sir Paul McCartney in 2012 and 2016 in BC Place and Rogers Arena, respectively, for the playing of Mull of Kintyre. Another memorable gig for the band was a performance in 1983 for Queen Elizabeth II and when she visited Vancouver. 3 years later, the band played for Prince Charles and Princess Diana as they opened Expo 86. The band has attended military tattoos all around the world, the most recent of which was Belfast, Ireland in 2023. They've been at tattoos in the Netherlands, Scotland, and Nova Scotia as well. This year, they will be representing the community of Delta again as they return to the Virginia International Tattoo in April. The members of the Delta Police Pipe Band are more than just performers. They are a vital part of our community's cultural fabric, bringing together people through music and tradition. They inspire pride and unity in Delta, reminding us of our shared history and values. I wanted to take these few minutes to honor the Delta Police Pipe Band, who not only has been a beacon of professionalism and good cheer for my constituents, but for the thousands they have entertained around the world for the last 54 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Surrey City Centre.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It's that time of year again. About 2 billion Muslims across the world will soon begin fasting during the holy month of Ramadan. From dawn to dusk, Muslims refrain from eating or drinking, and to answer the most common question, yes, that includes no water. We engage in regular prayer throughout the day and give alms to the less fortunate. To Muslims, this is not just a physical fast, but also a spiritual one, involving refraining from bad habits, negative thoughts, and actions. Fasting from dawn to sunset fosters empathy for those less fortunate and teaches the values of patience, humility, and generosity. It is a time to learn and maintain discipline of not just the mind, but also the soul. It is a time to disconnect from worldly distractions and reconnect with what truly matters, and that is faith, family, and community. The nightly prayers, the breaking of the fast, and the moments of quiet reflection bring peace to the heart, while the spirit of giving spreads love and kindness throughout the world. To Muslims, this month encourages a way of life that emphasizes the surrendering of one's heart, mind, and actions to the divine will. And this is actually the core value of Islam. Importantly, it is a reminder and a lesson that in moments of sacrifice, there is profound reward, and that even in times of challenge and adversity, there is always the opportunity for renewal, growth, and grace. So to my fellow Muslims, may this sacred month bring you peace, reflection, and spiritual growth. May your fasts be filled with patience and your prayers answered with mercy and blessings. Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you.
Member for Skeena.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to pay tribute to an extraordinary individual and a friend, Gladys Raddick, whose unwavering dedication to justice and healing for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls has profoundly impacted our communities. On February 14th, the Tears to Hope Society held their annual memorial march in Terrace, British Columbia. This event brought together over 50 participants, including families, local leaders, and supporters from various First Nations, to honor the lives of those lost and to stand in solidarity against ongoing injustices. While I was unable to attend due to commitments here in Victoria, my thoughts were with Gladys and all who gathered on that significant day. Gladys, a proud member of the Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en nations, has been a relentless advocate for over 2 decades. The tragic disappearance of her niece, Tamara Chipman, in 2005, along the Highway of Tears, transformed her grief into a powerful movement for change. She co-founded Walk for Justice, leading cross-country walks to amplify the voices of families affected by these tragedies. Her efforts were instrumental in the establishment of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. In 2020, realizing the need for a dedicated space for reflection and healing, Gladys envisioned and saw the creation of a memorial totem pole on Kitsum-Kalem territory. This totem pole now stands as a symbol of remembrance and a gathering place for ceremonies, including the recent Memorial March. Her leadership within the Tears to Hope Society continues to provide essential support and advocacy for families, ensuring that the memories of loved ones are honored and that their stories compel action. Gladys's resilience and compassion have inspired many, including myself. Her commitment to justice and her role as a mentor to emerging leaders exemplify the strength and spirit of Indigenous women. I am profoundly grateful for her friendship and the wisdom that she imparts. As we reflect on the significance of the February 14th Memorial March, let us also recognize the ongoing work required to address the systemic issues contributing to these tragedies. Gladys Raddick's unwavering dedication serves as a beacon of hope and a call to action for all of us to strive for a more just and compassionate society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Cowichan Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this month, I had the honor to attend the grand opening ceremony of the new Quatson School, located in the heart of Duncan. This new school replaces the Cowichan Secondary, which was built back in 1950s and had become too small for our community and was also seismically unsafe. What really makes this project special is the collaboration with the community throughout the planning, building, and opening phases, particularly with the school board and with Cowichan tribes. Through this collaboration, it was decided that the new secondary school would honor the original Hulkameetnam name of Cowichan, which the pronunciation of Cowichan is Quatson, similar to the shift in the spelling, is a testimony to our community's collective journey to truth and reconciliation. This new high school was built after receiving over $80 million in funding from the province. Seismic mitigation program. Built with a wood-first design and an abundance of natural light, the new school is warm and a welcoming place. The new school also features a neighborhood learning center that can host community programs, including a health clinic for youth that will be operated by Island Health. A longhouse depicted in the school is part of Samana Indigenous Language and Cultural Center. It includes beams, wood harvested from the Malahat Nation. In the outdoor learning and gathering space, I'm just wanting to say my grandnephew, Dean, was very excited because he attended Cow High, the old Cow High in grade 10, so now he's in grade 11, so he's experiencing the new school. So he was very excited on opening day. And as a Cowichan Tribes member, a great aunt, an aunt and a stepmom, and also a grandmother, I know that the important role of school plays in shaping children's lives and families' experiences in our community. I raise my hands in appreciation to the province for prioritizing the seismic upgrades for our schools and to everyone in our community who has worked together to create such a beautiful school where our children can learn, grow, and thrive for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Saanich North and Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to highlight Black History Month. Black history recognizes and celebrates the legacies of Black people in British Columbia and across the globe. Black History Month was first recognized in Canada in 1995. Here in BC, however, Black history is older than our province. Black pioneers have been shaping the culture of BC since 1858, when Governor Douglas invited free Blacks from California to come and live and thrive in BC. This started a legacy of culture and history for Black people here in BC. For example, the first Black teacher in BC, John Craven Jones, was the only teacher on Salt Spring Island, which is in my riding, in the year 1859, contributing to generations of teachers who shaped the future of British Columbians. Black History Month is celebrated every February throughout Canada as an ongoing celebration of culture, legacies, and contributions to our beautiful province. The BC Black History Awareness Society continues to celebrate and enrich our culture, including creating and distributing resources that teach about Black history in BC. As Black History Month comes to an end, I want to remind everyone that the strength of our province comes from our differences and the freedom of British Columbians to pursue their passions. Black food, fashion, music, and storytelling will continue to evolve and contribute to the diversity of our province. Please join me in honoring these contributions. Thank you.
Member for Vancouver-Langara.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to share a personal story from my childhood that shaped my perspective. My father often read verses from the Bhagavad Gita, and one that stood out to me was Karmanne vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, which translates to do your duty but do not concern yourself with the results. At the time, I did not fully understand or agree with this idea. I often wondered, why would we do anything if we weren't focused on the outcome? But as I grew older and gained more life experience, I came to understand the deeper meaning behind this wisdom. So often we get caught up in the results. We focus on outcomes, sometimes forgetting that the process, the effort is just as important. The truth is, we have the responsibility to do our duty, but we cannot control every factor that influences the results, whether it's past events, the efforts of others, or the circumstances around us. If we obsess over the outcome, it only leads to anxiety when things don't go as expected. That's why Lord Krishna advised his friend and disciple Arjuna to let go of the obsession with results and instead focus entirely on doing the best job possible. In our work here, every single one of us shares the same goal: to provide the best life possible for the people of British Columbia. So let's focus on our duty, our responsibility, and collaborate to make this vision a reality. When we focus on the work, the results will follow, and they will even be better than we anticipate. Thank you so much.
Madam Clerk.
Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Birds Lake has seen 25% of the time for its emergency room closed just this year alone. It is an hour and a half to the nearest facilities. Will the Premier please explain why that is acceptable health care for rural BC?
Minister of Health.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for the question. Anytime an emergency room is temporarily closed, where people need to be diverted to the closest place, is a very serious issue. It has a huge impact on communities. And I know that people want to have confidence in the system, to know that the emergency services are there for them when they need it. Mr. Speaker, we are experiencing a lot of strain in the healthcare system right now. We have a global shortage of healthcare workers, and that's why it's incumbent on us to do everything possible to train and recruit new doctors to our province, to hire more nurses and more healthcare workers across the system so that we can deal with the types of staff shortages that we have been seeing. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue this work, and I'm sure I'll have a chance to talk more about it in a moment. Thank you.
Member for Fraser-Nicola.
Sorry. I'd like to apologize, but I won't. Nicola Valley Hospital in my riding, ER has been closed for over 26 days in this past year. To the Premier, when will hospital closures stop in British Columbia?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I had the opportunity to speak with the Mayor of Merritt just yesterday, and we have spoken several times, as well as myself with many other mayors in rural areas where we're experiencing these shortages. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue this work to fast-track the credentialing of internationally trained doctors, to build a new medical school in Surrey, to train new doctors to work here in British Columbia. Mr. Speaker, to continue the work that we have to do to bolster and build our healthcare workforce so that we are not experiencing these kinds of closures anymore. Health authorities do everything possible they can, working with physicians in the region to mitigate and and avoid these kinds of closures. And Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to support health authorities in that work. We're going to continue to strengthen and attract and build this workforce because, Mr. Speaker, we know that particularly in rural communities, but in communities across British Columbia, people need to have a system that is there for them when they need it, where they need it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
House Leader of Third Party.
Over and over again, this government has shirked responsibility and left local governments to pick up the slack. Southern Vancouver Island municipalities are deeply concerned about paying the full cost of 911 emergency dispatch services. On April 1st, these 10 municipalities will be responsible for covering the entire estimated $5 million cost of ECOM 911 services in their region. My question, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. While we await the provincial review of ECOM services, will you commit to providing $5 million of transitional funding to cover South Island emergency dispatch services?
Solicitor General and Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. The responsibility for 911 services in British Columbia is purely the responsibility of the local government. It's delegated by the province through agreements like the Municipal Policing Agreement and the Provincial Policing Agreement. This applies regardless of whether a community is served by the RCMP or a local police detachment. South Island communities here on the island were informed in December 2022, 5 years in advance of starting this on March 21st, 2025, that they would be responsible for covering 100% of the costs associated with dispatching. We provide these municipalities with multi-year transitional funding to fully cover the police dispatch service until March 31st, 2025, with the understanding that the province and municipalities would then assume responsibility for funding at that point.
Thank you, Minister.
This traditional funding provided communities with over 3 years of additional funding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, supplemental.
These 10 municipalities are currently finishing their 2025 budgets and are being forced to consider raising taxes by 3 to 6% to cover the downloaded 911 emergency dispatch services, a cost, I should note, that is covered by provincial and federal funding in all other parts of the province. This is a matter of equity. Through you, Honourable Speaker, again to the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, will you make it a priority to work with these 10 municipalities to develop an equitable funding formula for South Island emergency dispatch funding?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You should know that we have contracted, that is, the Ministry of the Solicitor General has contracted a review of ECOM's financial sustainability, operational capacity, and government structure, and we will be making recommendations based upon that study and the future of 911 service in this province. ECOM and 911 services safety will not be impacted. Additionally, it has been communicated that there must be no impact or disruption of service. As the review is underway, communities will continue to be responsible for paying for the ECOM services they receive on call taking and dispatch services.
Thank you. Member for Boundary Similkameen.
The emergency room in Karamias has been closed evenings and weekends for 1,213 days. Why does this Premier think that this is acceptable?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. In Boundary Similkameen or in any riding across this province, people need to know that emergency services are there for them, that the emergency rooms are open for people. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of work to do to strengthen our healthcare system, and that's why we have been taking action for years in building and bolstering that healthcare workforce that we know is in the context of a global healthcare worker shortage. Mr. Speaker, British Columbia is not alone in experiencing these challenges. In addition to the work that we're doing to train new doctors, to attract new doctors, to hire more nurses, Mr. Speaker, we're also alleviating the strain that is felt by emergency rooms by building up our primary care workforce as well. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of work to do. We're going to continue to do it, and we're not going to stop.
Member for Courtney Comox.
Mr. Speaker, Lillooet Hospital has had its emergency department closed for 26 days. Does this Premier think it's reasonable for the good people of Lillooet to drive over 2 hours on snow-covered highways to reach Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops? Why does this Premier expect people to risk their lives to access basic emergency care?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I had the opportunity to speak recently with Mayor Hopful from Lillooet and really appreciated her observations and shared with her the concerns that she expressed to me. As the former mayor of a small town, I can certainly understand and empathize with how challenging it is and the kind of anxiety that it creates for people when hospitals are closed. I also had an excellent conversation with her about some of the work that she and other rural mayors and leaders are doing to help us in our goal of attracting more physicians, bringing more healthcare workers into small rural communities, which, Mr. Speaker, are fantastic places to live. That's why, because we know of particular shortages in these communities, we launched the Provincial Rural Retention Incentive Program to provide bonuses for people who are living in small communities to attract more workers to come to these communities. Mr. Speaker, this is just one example of the kind of work that we're doing so that we can continue to build the workforce so that we are able to have that strong healthcare system, a strong emergency department system in communities large and small across British Columbia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Caribou-Chilcotin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Caribou Memorial Hospital has had 18 days of emergency closures over the past year. Mr. Speaker, can the Premier explain how many hours of travel are acceptable when an emergency room closes in rural British Columbia?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And again, I will emphasize the work that we are doing to build up the workforce and to ensure that hospitals like in Quesnel and Williams Lake and other areas in the member's riding and nearby are not experiencing these kinds of diversions. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue that work. And by providing that kind of support, we know that we can build the workforce in these hospitals, that we can work with communities, with health authorities who do absolutely everything possible, working with physicians and emergency room nurses, working with local workforces nearby to ensure that as many shifts as possible are covered. Mr. Speaker, there are times when there are shortages, when somebody is ill, when they are not able to cover a shift. Health authorities are doing everything possible to avert those closures and then working with BC Emergency Health Services to ensure that ambulances and paramedics are in place to help with that travel assist. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prince George Mackenzie.
Mr. Speaker, the Mackenzie Hospital has been closed 13 times so far in 2025, and it's only the end of February. A simple question to the Premier: does he believe that Northerners deserve quality health care?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Every single British Columbian deserves health care, the access to our universal and public healthcare system here in British Columbia. We're going to continue to take these actions that I'm describing today to build the workforce, to strengthen the healthcare system, to ensure that our public healthcare system is there for British Columbians when and where they need it.
Member for Langley-Willowbrook.
Mr. Speaker, 100 Mile House District had its ER closed for 10 days. Royal Inland Hospital is 2 hours, over 200-kilometer drive. Mr. Speaker, why is the Premier forcing people to drive for hours for emergency care?
Minister.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, again, like provinces and other communities across Canada, we are experiencing healthcare worker shortages that have caused strain on the system, and yet every single day these doctors, these nurses, these healthcare workers are showing up delivering the best care possible for people here in British Columbia, and I think they deserve our thanks. So, Mr. Speaker, of course, we are going to continue this work, and we are seeing positive trends. Mr. Speaker, we do know that emergency room diversions and temporary closures have reduced by 40% over the last 6 months compared to the 6 months before. Is there more work to do, Mr. Speaker? Of course there is. And I'm sure we're going to canvass this throughout today. We are going to continue this work, and I'll continue to talk about all of that work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Member for Surrey Serpentine River.
Clearwater's Dr. Helmkin Memorial Hospital is an hour and a half away from Royal Inland Hospital. This Premier forced those needing emergency care to drive that distance on 9 separate days this year. Why does this Premier put people's lives at risk?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And of course, nobody wants to see this happening. And that's why we need to continue these efforts, to do these efforts collaboratively, collectively, to continue working with healthcare workers, with the doctors of BC, with the College of Physicians and Surgeons, with all of the organizations, with communities, to do everything that we can to build up this workforce, to attract more doctors. Mr. Speaker, this is one of my top priorities, and I know the members have read my mandate letter, Honourable Speaker, and they have seen that this is a top priority for this government. We did not get into this problem overnight, Mr. Speaker, and it is going to take time to resolve. And we are going to continue to do everything we can to lift up and respect our healthcare workers who are doing everything that they can under difficult circumstances. Mr. Speaker, this work is not going to stop.
Member for Abbotsford Mission.
Mr. Speaker, Mission Hospital ER was closed on 7 different occasions. Why does the Premier think that their emergencies are not important enough to have a local ER open?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Every single British Columbian deserves this access, and we know it, and we all want to see it. That's why we're going to continue our work, building the workforce, attracting more doctors, training them here. Mr. Speaker, expanding the number of seats in the UBC Medical School, building a new medical school in Surrey, because we know that when doctors are trained here in British Columbia, over 90% of them, Mr. Speaker, stay here in British Columbia. That's what we're going to do to build up this workforce to ensure that we have the doctors in place for a strong primary care system and for strong emergency rooms too.
Member for North Island.
Fort St. James had its ER shut down for 6 days by this Premier. The ER at UNBC Hospital is 160 kilometers away. Why is this Premier forcing them to take a 2-hour ambulance ride to an open ER?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite again for the question. And again, there is work to do, and we are doing that work. Mr. Speaker, we have tripled our capacity for credentialing international doctors. Mr. Speaker, we're working with the College of Physicians and Surgeons to ensure that doctors moving to British Columbia from other provinces in Canada can get their temporary licensure immediately, and that doctors who want to move here to British Columbia from comparable jurisdictions like the US or the UK receive those provisional licenses within 6 weeks. Mr. Speaker, when somebody comes to British Columbia to practice medicine, we want them to be on the front lines. And that's why we're doing this work. We're going to continue to do this work so that we can build a strong healthcare system and make sure that these emergency room diversions are lessening, and we've got more work to do. We're going to continue doing it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Columbia River Revelstoke.
Mr. Speaker, the Slocan Community Health Centre ER is over 2 hours from Queen Victoria Hospital and 4 hours from Kelowna General. Its ER was closed for 5 days. Why does this Premier expect people to drive through dangerous mountain passes to get emergency care?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And again, another example of small communities and knowing, needing to know that those emergency rooms are there for people when they need them. Mr. Speaker, there are so many people who are working so hard to do everything they can to avert these kinds of closures. And when they need to happen, because of staffing shortages, Mr. Speaker, because of illnesses, because of the need to continue to build this workforce, Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to do this work. I understand, as a member of a small community myself, I live in Tofino, we are so fortunate to have a hospital there. And I can imagine what it would feel like for my community members to know that they cannot go to the emergency room in Tofino, that they would have to drive all the way to Port Alberni. Mr. Speaker, I understand how challenging and difficult this is for people, and that's why I am so personally committed to ensuring that this work is done and that we can make progress as we already are. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kelowna Lake Country and Coldstream.
Arrow Lakes Hospital ER was closed for 5 days. Why did this Premier force those in Arrow Lakes to drive for hours to get emergency care on 5 different occasions?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And again, it's hard for anybody in any community to know that their emergency room is not available to them. They want to know that that care is there when they need it, when it's most urgent in their situation. Mr. Speaker, that's why we're going to continue the work that I've been speaking about this morning. Mr. Speaker, we're not going to stop this work, but we're also going to continue to do other things to build out the healthcare system in ways where people do not have to rely on emergency rooms as much. Mr. Speaker, that includes things like connecting more people to family doctors, where again, we are seeing successes, Mr. Speaker, with people, almost 700 people a day now being attached to a primary care physician to remove or to lessen the likelihood of needing to go for non-urgent care, non-emergency care to the emergency room. But Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue this work, continue to build out the number of doctors, nurses, healthcare workers across the entire system to build that strong public healthcare system that British Columbians deserve.
Member for Peace River North.
Mr. Speaker, last year in the Peace region, all 4 ER rooms closed on the same day, forcing people to have to drive up to 10 hours to seek critical care. To the Premier, when, and I'd like to hear a date, is he going to address the closures of these critical services that are happening over and over in rural BC?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. We are seeing progress. We do know that the number of emergency room closures have come down 40% over the last 6 months. That's a product of the work that so many people are doing to minimize the likelihood of this having to happen. And again, health authorities, physicians, nurses, nobody wants this to happen, and that's why everybody is taking every step possible to avert these kinds of closures. But it is going to take all of us, with the actions that we've outlined, that I've been canvassing today, by the investments that we're making in new hospitals in rural British Columbia as well, so that people have that top-notch care, the care that they deserve here in British Columbia.
Member for Skeena. Member for Skeena.
Thank you. 800 hours Kitimat's ER was closed last year, and that's just between January and September. Why does this Premier think it's okay to force my constituents to drive hours on snow-covered highways to access an ER?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I was really privileged to be able to visit the members' riding back in January and participate in the opening of the new Kasian Regional Hospital in Terrace. This is an absolutely phenomenal facility that is providing care to people in the region, including people in Kitimat, when the emergency room in Kitimat has not been able to be staffed and when diversions have taken place and people have had to come up to Terrace. Mr. Speaker, I know how hard that is on people. I can well imagine it because of where I live too, Mr. Speaker. That's why we're going to continue to do this work. We're going to continue to do things like building the hospital that we've done in Terrace, by undertaking all of the work to hire new workers in hospitals. And Mr. Speaker, we are making progress. We're going to continue this work because, as we can see, canvassing all of these questions today, it is extremely challenging for people no matter what size of the community they live in, and that's why we're going to continue this work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Peace River South.
Mr. Speaker, BC's North needs proper ER access. Masset on Haida Gwaii deserves proper ER access. Chetwynd, Tumbler Ridge, and Dawson Creek deserve proper ER access. Why did this Premier close their ER doors?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much, and thank you to the member for the question. And yes, in Masset or in Fort St. James or in Terrace or in Fort St. John, no matter where you live in British Columbia, you need access to care when and where you need it. Mr. Speaker, that's why we're going to continue this work. We're going to continue investing in rural communities, building new hospitals, building new clinics with health authorities, continuing that work to train and hire more doctors, more nurses, more healthcare workers. We are making progress, Mr. Speaker. There's an incredible amount of work more to do. I know that everybody in this House recognizes that, and I am sure that every single person is dedicated to continuing to support their communities, their health authorities, and that we can do this work together. Thank you.
Member for Delta South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Delta residents had their ER closed for 2 days last weekend and possibly this weekend as well. They are being asked to go to Surrey, where wait times are as high as 18 hours. Are Delta residents supposed to accept that ER closures are the new normal?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Again, these are very, very challenging situations for people. And when the emergency room closed in Delta last week, it was really hard for people to take. And I spoke to the mayor myself as well, and we had a good conversation about some of the challenges that are being experienced. And he certainly reflected the concerns that he is hearing from his constituents. Mr. Speaker, that's why we need to continue the work that we're doing. And we're not going to stop. We know that we need to attract, hire, retain more emergency room physicians, more family doctors to alleviate the pressure, to continue to expand the UPCC network, the Urgent and Primary Care network across British Columbia, to alleviate that strain on emergency rooms. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue that work.
Member for Penticton-Summerland.
The South Okanagan General Hospital emergency room saw 40 days of closures this year. To the Premier, how many ER closures are enough before this government takes action?
Minister.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question too. Again, no matter where you live in British Columbia, knowing that the emergency room is there for you when you need it is of utmost importance. It's very difficult, even when you don't anticipate having an emergency, to know that something you've depended on for years and years and years is being challenged. These are strains that are being felt across the healthcare system nationally and even further. Mr. Speaker, that's why we have to continue the work that we've been doing. Mr. Speaker, that's why it's promising that we're seeing initial results, but we're not going to let up. We've got to continue this work so that we can ensure that everyone living in British Columbia, no matter whether a small community, a large community, has access to the healthcare that they need when they need it.
Member for Kootenay Rockies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Elkford's ER department in my riding has been closed for over 2 years. 2 years. Why did the Premier do nothing to prevent Elkford's ER from closing?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And again, if you live in Elkford or Sparwood or Fernie or anywhere out in the southeast Kootenays, you need to know that the emergency room is there for you and that our healthcare system is here for you. Mr. Speaker, healthcare workers are doing phenomenal work under very challenging conditions right now. And I think it's important that we remember that this is difficult on them as well. Mr. Speaker, that's why we have to continue this work of attracting more doctors, of building out nursing shortages, of ensuring that we have all the healthcare workers across the entire system that we need. Mr. Speaker, that's why for small communities like this, the Provincial Rural Retention Incentive has helped to bring new people into communities. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue these programs. We're going to continue this work because we know it's,
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
It's what has to be done. Thank you.
Member for Prince George Valemount.
Mr. Speaker, the hospital in Creston Valley has also closed and is vital for the community. So again, why does the Premier continue to close ER services for those in crisis?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And again, any person living in a community where an emergency room that has been open is now closed temporarily or for longer in some cases, it's an extremely stressful situation and creates a lot of anxiety. I recognize that. We all recognize that. That's why this work has to continue. And also, Mr. Speaker, that's why in the situation like this, when this happens, it's why it's so important to work closely with the BC Emergency Health Services, of course, and ensuring that paramedics, ambulances know when a diversion is there, because we want, of course, to ensure that people get to care as quickly as possible when they need it. But, Mr. Speaker, it's also why we're continuing to build out our primary care system, ensuring that people have access to other treatment, to reduce the likelihood of needing to go to an emergency room for non-emergency care in the first place. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue this work.
Member for Surrey White Rock. Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say the last 30 minutes have been a pretty damning indication on the state of our healthcare here in British Columbia. Every part of this province has been represented today speaking about the state of our healthcare. Can you imagine having your child, your ailing child, in the back of your car and having to drive 10 hours to access an emergency room department? Shame. That is the state. Can you imagine going to Surrey Memorial Hospital and waiting 18 hours to access an emergency room department? Shame. Shame. When people in this province seek health care, seek an emergency room, they should expect that they're able to get that access when they need it and where they need it. And that is not happening today. Furthermore, when our healthcare workers go into, I'm sorry if this is inconvenient for the members of government, but what's more inconvenient is when you're trying to access an emergency room and it's closed. Yeah. That's inconvenient.
Question, member.
My question is this. Yesterday I highlighted the fact that we had a horrific incident in South Surrey. That person was then taken to Peace Arch Hospital, and from what we know now, that person actually tried and attempted to take the firearm of an officer in that hospital. That person restrained by the physician. Restrained by the physician.
Question,
so not only, I'm sorry if this is inconvenient. What was inconvenient was for a physician who had to intervene to protect his staff and protect a frontline worker.
Thank you, member.
So my question is to the Premier. When will he wake up and when will he actually stand up for British Columbians for that when they need health care that they can get it, and for the workers, the frontline workers that are in our hospitals, when is he going to stand up and make sure they're protected as well?
Thank you. Members, members, show some discipline, please.
We have.
Member from Abbotsford South. Member, come to order. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will stand up for healthcare workers each and every day.
Member. Question period almost concluded. If we are done, member, for God's sake, be quiet. Please conclude.
I'll stand up for healthcare workers each and every day, as will every member of this government. Mr. Speaker, we have canvassed many different communities across BC in today's question period. Mr. Speaker, I didn't hear any ideas from the opposition, but one idea I have heard is bringing in a U.S.-style two-tier healthcare system that would poach doctors and nurses from our system and make it worse.
The bell ends the question period. Honourable members, I have the honour to table the Auditor General Report, Child Care Licensing Capacity, February 2025. Madam Clerk. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I seek leave to make an introduction.
Is leave granted?
Aye.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to wish my mother a happy birthday. Unfortunately, my mother had a serious heart attack on Monday, and she's in the hospital on her birthday. Nothing that any of us would wish to be doing on our birthday. But I did want to take this moment to really thank the ER in the Namur Regional General Hospital, who have been outstanding in their care for my mom. I wanted to thank the nurses, particularly, and the internist, Dr. Musa, and recognize that every day, extraordinary people stand up to take care of our family. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Orders of the day.
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. In this House, I call second reading Bill 4, Business Practices and Consumer Protection Act.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. We'll call this House back to order, and we will recognize our Attorney General to open debate on Bill 4, Business Practices and Consumer Protection Amendment Act of 2025. Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, thank you. I move that the bill now be read a second time. Bill 4 proposes to amend the Business Practices and Consumer Protection Act to modernize the consumer contract provisions to protect consumers in an increasingly complex marketplace. Increasingly, because of the complexities of contracts and the speed at which they're reached online, people are vulnerable to practices that result in increased costs, hidden unfair contract obligations. Whether it's drip pricing, where providers keep adding extra fees and those provisions are built into the contract, or trap by design, where contracts are set up to lock people into terms while letting the provider increase costs over time of their service. Many people in BC and across the world are frustrated by automatic renewals when they don't want them, that keep adding to monthly costs for families. Or fitness contracts that won't let you cancel the monthly payments even when you move far away from that fitness facility. Also subscriptions services that can be very difficult to cancel and make it frustrating for consumers. We're also stepping up to prevent unscrupulous salespeople from showing up at the doors of seniors and selling them highly overpriced items, sometimes not even delivering the services paid for. All of these things are unfair, cause frustration to consumers, and add to costs of people that already are under tight budgets. This bill proposes to take action to change that. If these amendments are passed, we will ensure a fairer, more transparent, and accountable marketplace for all British Columbians. Mr. Speaker, the BC consumer protection laws were last updated in 2004, and the marketplace has evolved significantly since then. British Columbians have been hit by hidden fees and unclear contracts. They've faced unfair contract terms and predatory sales practices, and I'm confident that these amendments will better protect people. I think it's important to illustrate some of the specific examples that come up in people's everyday life that this bill will help protect. So businesses will be required to provide clear contract terms upfront, including renewal, cancellation, and refund policies. So before you sign on to a contract, you can fully understand what you're signing or the key terms of what you're signing before you enter into that agreement. So people buying new cell phones and entering into those agreements will be giving more transparent information upfront prior to entering into the contract. So whether it's a streaming service, a paid app, or any other form of subscription, you will now have more control over the renewal. If it's passed, you'll have more control over the renewal and cancellation of their contract. We're improving remedies for consumers around refunds, returns, and cancellations, particularly for online orders. We've heard many frustrations from online orders where somebody buys something online, like clothing or other items, and there's very obscure refund policies or obstructive refund policies or ways that help the consumer, prevent the consumer from getting their money back when they no longer want the item. So we're changing that. We are requiring there to be clear instructions of how to obtain a refund, and it will be clear that in some cases, that people don't have to return that item to be eligible for a refund. So through contracts, businesses can no longer prevent consumers from leaving reviews. It's sometimes shocking to think about the things that are hidden inside these contracts that people sign either online or mostly online in today's marketplace, that they don't know what they're being bound to. And one of them is contract provisions that say you're not allowed to leave a review of my business online. You can imagine the way most people consume and understand where they should consume. Reviews play a really big role in that. I think everybody has an example of right before they're about to purchase something, going online and checking reviews to see what the product has done over time and whether or not it will be useful to them, or it's something where they put their money, especially under tight budgets. So obviously, I think those kind of contracts need to be prevented. Consumers need information, and sometimes the best way of getting that information is from other consumers that have purchased that product. So this is a very clear way to step in to prevent that type of behavior, so we can increase the information out there. Another thing that we will prevent through changes in the bill, if it's passed, are joining provisions that say a consumer is not entitled to join a class action lawsuit related to the product. you know, I think this is an example of an access to justice issue that sometimes can be written into contracts. In a free and open marketplace where consumers are making decisions of where to spend their money, it's important they also have the opportunity to have the remedies that are available to them under law should something go wrong. And there's questions about the legality of provisions like this, but what is clear is that consumer protection laws need to be strengthened to make sure that when products are for sale, all people know that these type of provisions are not allowed here in BC. There also are provisions sometimes hidden in contracts that talk about requiring very costly arbitration or private arbitration when there is a dispute. Now, binding consumers to these types of dispute resolution processes can be very expensive, but also really prohibitive to the person from seeking some kind of dispute to when they've been wronged or they feel like they've been wronged. So we are changing that, and I'll go into a little more detail in a second. Another thing that we're stepping up to make sure that's a real life example of how consumers can need better protection is door-to-door sales of high-cost household products. It's been widely reported and by many good journalists out there that have found that there is a tactic that's showing up on doors across the country and potentially North America, where very highly persuasive salespeople will purposefully target vulnerable buyers. So whether it's seniors' homes or places where they're maybe more vulnerable to their tactics, they show up at the door and they use these highly persuasive sale tactics to force sales on individuals for particularly high-priced items. And we've listed them in the bill of the ones that we've been monitoring to make sure that we can up the protections. This is an extremely stressful practice, and I want to stress if for those people listening that may be wanting to understand about these protections, a lot of times we find that when these kind of really abhorrent behaviors occur at the door, people feel ashamed and they feel as if they don't want to tell people the story of being duped and paying these really crazy amounts for household items that they didn't need or didn't want, because these tactics are designed to take advantage of people's vulnerability. And I want to say not to be ashamed. We're stepping up for better protections through this bill to prevent that from happening. But if it has happened to you, we need to know about it. We need to know what we have, how we have to design our systems and our protections here in BC to step up when that is happening. And we're doing that with this bill in particular. We've listed in the bill those particular high-cost items that we are tracking and monitoring are showing up in these type of really vulnerable and interactions that can result in real hardship for people. And we're preventing that with some very clear restrictions and guidance on that will be set to disrupt those highly persuasive tactics for vulnerable people. So the contracts for these items can't be completed at the doorstep in that time. So it interrupts these kind of interactions that are causing people quite a bit of harm. These changes reflect how the evolving marketplace and keeps BC in line with leading consumer protection laws across Canada. Another key change that I just want to highlight in second reading here is dispute resolution. A lot of our work, and certainly since I've been in my role as Attorney General, is about improving access to justice in many ways as we can. We want to make sure that people can have access to some kind of remedy when they need to access our justice system. And a real important tool to that, and in addition that we're quite proud of building upon, is a civil resolution tribunal, which is a low barrier, low access court or legal process that allows people to bring their claims forward, and in this case, claims for under $5,000, which would fit a large category of a lot of the items and issues that we would be talking about in consumer transactions. And to do that allows people to get a remedy faster, cheaper, and more in their control. and it'll profoundly open up the access to justice abilities under this Consumer Protection Act, and I really think this is a very strong intervention in this bill. Those who don't comply will face monetary penalties of up to $50,000 for businesses and $5,000 for people, for a person. And you know, those types of provisions that allow for a penalty, they act in our legal system not only as a remedy for people that are harmed, but also as a deterrent. So people know that if they are breaching or not designing their contracts to comply with the rules that are set out under consumer protection, that there will be consequences. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that at the heart of this is our continued action to step up to protect people and help to reduce costs that they may be facing in their daily lives. And in a lot of ways, the most important way we show up in society is through where we spend our money and how we spend our money, and especially under tight budgets. And when there are no strong provisions to protect consumers related to these very complicated contracts they encounter, related to setting up systems to block people from able to cancel subscriptions, being able to not be bound by automatic renewal, not being able to exit a fitness contract even though they moved away. These can not only be frustrating to people, but they also are adding to people's daily burden, and it's not right. So this bill will send a clear message to all operators in BC that where there are rules with respect to what information is needed before somebody enters a contract, that you can't keep on increasing costs without proper notification and decision-making with the person and the consumer, and you can't bind people to things that are unfair and unwarranted, and we're going to continue to step up these protections. I'll just end by saying that I'm really grateful that the Premier has asked me to take on consumer protection in BC and how it shows up in our province and what we could be doing to protect consumers in this province. I think there is a lot. I'm glad that we're updating this law that hasn't been updated since 2004. But I see a lot of work ahead of us to keep up with the changing marketplace that sometimes makes people feel disempowered and disengaged from how and when and the control they have over their money and how they spend it. And that needs to change. So I'm really grateful that this is the first, really proud that this is the first step our government is taking in this mandate on that, and there'll be many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General, for opening up debate this morning on Bill 4, Business Practices and Consumer Protection Amendment Act of 2025. The Chair will recognize the member from Richmond, Queensborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in the House to address Bill 4, the Business Practices and Consumer Protection Amendment Act of 2025. I begin by saying that our caucus respects and supports the principle of protecting consumers. We recognize that individuals deserve fair treatment when they buy goods and services. However, we cannot support the heavy burden this bill will place on businesses in this province. These amendments carry so much uncertainty that they threaten the survival of many local enterprises, and we find ourselves unable to overlook this potential harm. Our province has been through a difficult economic period. A lot of businesses are struggling right now. A lot of small businesses are struggling right now. This isn't an isolated slump that we're dealing with. Recent years have been hard on businesses here in British Columbia. Small businesses in BC are struggling with increasing costs for materials and shipping, along with labor shortages and reduced consumer spending. NDP big government bureaucracy, taxes, and red tape are strangling innovation and enterprise in our province. In many communities, family-run stores and locally owned service providers are only just beginning to regain their footing after years of financial strain. Many entrepreneurs are considering leaving the province, yet at the very moment this business needs policies that will foster growth and stability. They are facing this piece of NDP legislation that only adds even more confusion and expense to daily operations. Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize that this bill in question restricts mandatory arbitration clauses, as we just heard, and massively expands cancellation rights for consumers. In principle, consumer rights are vital. All British Columbians are consumers, so there needs to be some protections for consumers. We agree with the idea that consumers should not be trapped in fraudulent and misleading deals. Still, it is essential to remember that business owners have rights as well. They supply the jobs that families rely on, and they form the backbone of our local economies. This socialist NDP bill seeks to erode contract law in BC by weakening enforcement mechanisms. Contract law is an essential foundation of Western economic freedom and capitalism. When the law creates an environment of extreme uncertainty for those already under economic stress, our small businesses risk being pushed out of the market altogether. Let us consider the elimination of the arbitration clause first. Arbitration can be a practical and efficient method of dispute resolution. It often saves time and money and can be less formal than going through a court proceeding. I understand that government wants to give consumers more options, but the bill goes too far by removing the possibility of mandatory arbitration entirely. In effect, it raises the likelihood of prolonged legal battles in courts or before tribunals. Many small businesses cannot afford to hire lawyers for such lengthy disputes. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of businesses are struggling. A lot of small businesses are struggling. They do not have legal departments. They do not have the budgets for legal expenses at the current time. Many small businesses cannot afford to hire lawyers for lengthy disputes. Their resources are already stretched thin from facing rising taxes, unpredictable shipping fees, and high real estate costs. Local businesses have been struggling to get by after years of global and national uncertainty. Pushing our businesses and entrepreneurs into an expensive court process whenever a dispute arises is neither fair nor practical. I also worry about the broad cancellation provisions in this bill. Consumer protection demands fair rules that allow for refunds if the purchase was made under trickery or forceful sale tactics. But the text of this bill goes beyond that. It permits cancellation under such flexible conditions that it risks destabilizing entire sectors of BC's economy. Legitimate businesses might invest significant time, money, and labor into fulfilling orders only to see them canceled at the slightest technical shortcoming in documentation. A minor oversight in contract language could become the excuse for a complete contract cancellation, even if the consumer willingly entered the deal with clear information. Even if the consumer had some time to review that contract. Even if that consumer had a few days to review that contract. This is not a receipt for a stable marketplace. It is a set of rules that can be abused and that punishes businesses that operate in good faith. Mr. Speaker, the strain on small businesses becomes particularly concerning when we add the complexity of these compliance obligations in this piece of legislation. This NDP bill contains various clauses about how companies must disclose terms, maintain records, and supply customers with certain notices and statements. While there exists positive intent behind these disclosures, small businesses and many larger companies do not have the in-house legal departments, as I mentioned earlier, to ensure they meet every new requirement. Many do not have the budgets to hire external lawyers or consultants to decode hundreds of pages of detailed legislation or formulate a complex factual matrix. The last few years have already battered our businesses with higher rent, costly shipping delays, supply chain uncertainty, and unstable consumer spending. Burdening these businesses with more complicated paperwork at this time is unfair and short-sighted. This NDP first order thinking at its this is NDP's first order thinking at its finest. If government truly cares about the welfare of small businesses, it must ensure that this legislation does not become the final straw that drives businesses out of this province, or leads to a situation where businesses close their doors for good. I also take note that Bill 4 lacks a built-in review mechanism. Legislation of this significance should include a system of periodic assessment to check its real-world impact. Many new laws can have unintended effects, especially when they touch upon such wide-ranging areas and contract law and consumer relations. A review mechanism is desperately needed to identify any sections that are causing disproportionate harm to small businesses or allowing unscrupulous individuals to take advantage of businesses that are simply doing their best to meet new obligations. Without a review process, we are stuck with sweeping amendments that could harm an entire generation of BC entrepreneurs. Adjustments might come too late or never at all. Meanwhile, cherished family-run shops might vanish, and with them go crucial networks of local jobs and community connections. Mr. Speaker, the broader economic climate in British Columbia should not be overlooked, as I mentioned earlier. Businesses in this province have endured many waves of financial shocks, for which there's some dire consequences. The business community has really struggled under the present NDP government. And some of the things that the business community has had to deal with is a record year of high inflation caused by ballooning spending. Also a job-killing carbon tax, followed by excessive red tape and regulations that slow development and increases in compliance costs, and expensive labor policies coupled with the government's interventionary real estate disruptions. If the government has their way in this bill, as it is currently, it'll be the final nail in the coffin for many businesses. And this bill could lead to eroding sacred elements of contract law in British Columbia. Large corporations might survive these challenges. They have the capital to pivot or the legal teams to navigate new regulations. However, small enterprises lack such resources. When a well-intentioned but overly broad consumer protection law hits them in the already fragile economy, the effect can be devastating. As it stands, the bill creates so much uncertainty that small businesses may decide it is no longer worth the risk to remain in operation in British Columbia. This is an intolerable outcome, Mr. Speaker. There is also a real possibility that larger entities can absorb, larger corporate entities can absorb the rising compliance costs, while smaller competitors are forced to scale back or close down for good. This loss of competition hurts not only local workers, but local consumers too. The very people this short-sighted law is trying to protect. People will see fewer independent shops in their neighborhoods. They will be forced to buy necessities from only a few major chains. This is contrary to the goal of consumer protection. Without local options, there is less choice for consumers, less local flavor, and less of the personal service many people value from their neighborhood outlets. Mr. Speaker, we are calling on the government to reconsider Bill 4 in the way that it acknowledges the real pressures and damages that businesses have seen in the last 8 years inflicted in a once thriving British Columbia economy. The changes that are proposed might benefit some consumers for a moment, but in the long run, communities will suffer and local businesses will face further obstacles to compete. The correct approach is one that ensures consumers do not get taken advantage of, while also giving honest businesses the assurance that they will not be swept away by legal uncertainty. It is not about ignoring misconduct by some suppliers. It is about passing a bill that thoughtfully accommodates the economic reality on the ground. Many operators are already struggling with everything from supply shortages to rising wage demands. This legislature should help ease the burden whenever possible, not increase it. Some may argue that small businesses can adapt by adjusting their contracts or raising their prices to offset the new risks and compliance costs. But this is not an acceptable path forward. Higher prices mean consumers may pay more in the end. More complicated contracts can confuse consumers and customers and might still fail to satisfy every detail in these amendments. The net result is a marketplace fraught with tension between buyer and seller. Instead of cooperation, we have mistrust as businesses worry about liability exposure and consumers wonder if contracts they sign are stable. That's not healthy for our economy, as diverse and vibrant as British Columbia's. We must not lose sight of how legislation like this affects the day-to-day life of our towns and cities. When corner stores disappear or local service providers shut down, the community loses more than just places to shop. We lose gathering spots, meeting places, sponsors for youth sports and events, and the personal relationships that often grow between small business owners and their customers. As legislators, we are responsible for the well-being of all stakeholders. That includes both consumers and businesses. The bill in its current form leans too far in one direction. We need a system that fosters trust, not one that creates fear and uncertainty on the business side of each transaction. Mr. Speaker, I ask this chamber truly reflect on the wide-ranging impact of Bill 4 that Bill 4 will have. It's not about whether we believe consumers should be protected. We do. We do believe consumers need to be protected. It's about whether this bill accomplishes the goal without unintentionally driving countless small and medium-sized enterprises to the brink. We must look for a balance. We must protect everyday people from abusive contracts, but we must also spare local businesses from an avalanche of litigation and cancellation disputes that leave them scrambling to react. If we pass the bill in its current state, we will do more harm than good. Let us think carefully about how to amend or refine this legislation so we safeguard not just the interests of consumers, but the very foundation of local commerce and capitalism in British Columbia. For these reasons, we cannot support Bill 4 in its present form. We on this side of the House call on the government to revise these amendments. We call for a measured approach that strengthens consumer rights without undermining the good faith operators who are essential to British Columbia's economy. We are willing to work collaboratively on a bill that truly respects both sides of the equation. Right now, we must stand up for the small businesses that are the lifeblood of British Columbia. That means rejecting the NDP's Bill 4 in its current form so that we do not impose crippling uncertainty at a time when we should be doing all we can to keep our province stable, prosperous, and fair for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, member. Chair will recognize the Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it's the first time I've seen you in this seat as a speaker, and I just want to congratulate you. It's a pleasure to see you there, Chair. Where to begin on Bill number 4? For those who didn't have the opportunity to hear the member opposite share their views on Bill 4, let me share them with you as I understood them to be. This is, he argues, this bill could collapse BC's economy, that it could, in fact, impact the very foundation of capitalism in British Columbia, to quote. Honourable Chair, I'm shocked by these comments. We are talking about a bill that is targeted at unscrupulous behavior, Mr. Chair. Unscrupulous behavior. Does the member opposite really believe that that represents our business community? I was in that business community for 20 years and I'm offended. I am offended of that characterization of our business community, which is full of honorable business people who believe in taking care of their consumers and who treat them properly. That's who makes up our business community. I'm shocked, Honourable Speaker, the very foundation of capitalism in British Columbia. Mr. Speaker, Bill number 4 is an important bill that protects consumers' rights. We know that the vast majority of business people in British Columbia are fair actors. who engage in practices that are about providing much needed services and goods for a consumer who wants those services and goods and will pay for them because they're valued to them. That is the concept of a contract. It is a win-win, Honourable Chair, not what the member opposite has suggested, that our economy is based on exploitation of seniors and that we are in favor of allowing unscrupulous business practices. Mr. Chair, this is an important bill, and I don't want to lose track of that. Let's think about what this bill in fact does. It's an amendment to British Columbia's Business Practices and Consumer Protection Act. It's about enhancing consumer rights, Honourable Chair, and protections in this province. Very much what most business people, the vast majority of business people, do every day. But there are bad actors, Honourable Chair. And that's why there are necessary changes that reflect a broader effort to create a more transparent, fair, and accountable marketplace for consumers, especially in the wake of increasing online transactions. Mr. Speaker, the last time this House made amendments to this Act was 2004. At that time, in 2004, only about 10% of Canadians were shopping online. By the end of 2025, that number was 78%. These times have changed, and this House needs to change as well, and this bill is about ensuring that we're stepping into the modern era, Honourable Chair. British Columbians need to be protected while they shop online and when they shop in person. Now, Honourable Chair, this is an important bill, and our Attorney General cares deeply about working in conjunction with the business community, ensuring that fairness is present. And consultation, of course, occurred on this bill. And in fact, we received submissions from many important organizations. I'll mention a few: the Automotive Retailers Association, the BC Public Interest Advocacy Council, Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, Consumer Council of Canada, the Council of Senior Citizens Organizations, Direct Sellers Association, the Public Guardian and Trustee and the Public Interest Advocacy of Canada, and the Retail Council of Canada. People who represent both consumers and businesses to ensure that we're striking the right balance to protect consumers in these marketplaces. Honourable Chair, imagine being caught in a situation where you unknowingly sign up for an online subscription that automatically renews year after year, or whether you're faced with a product return policy that's needlessly complicated and nearly impossible to navigate. I'll share with you a personal story. I used to have a membership at a gym, shocking many perhaps, but I went with some regularity, and it was a great gym. I loved it, up until the point where I needed to cancel the contract. Now, I moved from not very far, but there was a bridge in between it. I moved from sort of the Kitsilano area over to Yaletown. And the place that I moved into had a fabulous gym that came with my rental agreement. I didn't need my gym membership anymore. Now, I could have lived with had I been required to let it run out its entire year. That seems reasonable. I was hoping that because I moved, I could cancel it. They said no. It was too close of a move. I could still come. So I thought, okay, I'll let it run out after the year. That's the way it is. However, the detail was I had to attend in person. There was only one day of a week that I could attend, and it had to be between 1 and 2 o'clock. Now, I don't need to tell you, Honourable Chair, that our lifestyle doesn't accommodate being a particular place Wednesday between 1 and 2 o'clock. I couldn't cancel my membership. I couldn't get there. That is not fair business practices. That's not someone that I want to protect. I love small businesses. I love small businesses. I support them. I've been a small business person, and I can tell you I would never have behaved in that way. And most small businesses don't behave in that way. It was an unreasonable practice, and that will get rid of, this bill will get rid of that. And I'm not alone in this. Many people have experienced frustration when dealing with unfair contracts or unclear terms, whether online or in person. These everyday struggles highlight the pressing need for change. The proposed amendments to British Columbia's Business Practices and Consumer Protection Act aim to address exactly these issues by ensuring that consumers are better informed, protected, and empowered. These changes come at a crucial time when more and more people are making purchases online and facing businesses that sometimes take advantage of unclear terms. The new legislation will help ensure that consumers no longer have to worry about being blindsided by unfair practices, giving us all the tools to make smarter and safer decisions when we spend our money. It also includes improved transparency. Consumers will now receive essential contract terms up front, ensuring that they're better informed before committing to any purchases or services. This includes clearer details on renewals, cancellation, return, refund policies, and which will apply particularly to online purchases, making the process more transparent. Businesses will be required to notify about automatic subscription renewals well in advance, preventing unwanted charges and providing consumers with better control over their subscriptions. We're getting rid of trap by design. So, for example, imagine that you're a busy mom in my community and you sign up for a subscription online, perhaps for a meal service, and you wanted to try it, it wasn't your cup of tea, and you didn't get a chance to cancel it right away, and it keeps coming for an entire year. Under the new rules, the company must notify that person a month before the renewal date, allowing that person to be drawn to the attention that they need to take that action in order to go ahead with the cancellation, and thus avoiding those unnecessary charges. Businesses will be restricted from making significant changes to contracts without first obtaining the consumer's explicit consent. I don't know about you, but that's shocking to me. That's something we need. Could it be you make changes in a contract without consumers' consent already? And the answer is yes. You know, there are situations where within contracts it says we can change the price within this contract, the terms of the contract without your consent. That is not a fair business practice. When a contract changes, it should be through agreement on both parties, and this bill will address that challenge. Contracts will no longer be able to include terms that prevent consumers from participating in class action lawsuits. Understand that, Honourable Chair, that there are contracts that tell consumers that you cannot have the right to participate in a class action lawsuit. This is an important protection, Honourable Chair, and to take it away from people is not just, it will not lead to the downfall of our economy, and we need to get rid of it. That will happen in Bill number 4. Also, it will get rid of the ability to limit reviews about a business. Honourable Speaker, welcome to the Chair. And that's important. In the online world, it's become very important that you can leave a review for two reasons. One, many of us rely on those reviews. We want to know if people are having a positive experience. We want to know if the item that we're buying is in fact similar to the way it's been described. Or is it smoke and mirrors? Being able to look at reviews and help make an informed decision is something that many of us we've become reliant on. Also, we know that having these reviews can actually lead to change. And I'll remind people of that wonderful, hilarious song about United breaking the guitar. And if you haven't seen it, you must look it up. It was a story about a gentleman on a plane who looked outside and saw his guitar, his beloved guitar, being tossed around, dropped on the ground, and sure enough, when he went to pick it up, it was smashed. And he wrote a song about it, which went viral and led to changes in United's policies. It's because online reviews are powerful that it's important that we keep them. Restricting people's right to online reviews is not correct, and this bill will correct it. It also addresses the question of forcing consumers into private arbitration for disputes, which often disadvantages the consumer. Now, I heard the member opposite say, well, this is terrible because, small businesses don't have access to lawyers and, this is going to be terribly expensive for them. Well, I can tell you, first of all, the small businesses that I know won't be doing these unfair practices. The vast majority of small businesses don't. This is about the rare actor who's unscrupulous. And if you are unscrupulous, perhaps you're going to need a lawyer. But the real issue here is that it's the consumer who, through these agreements, is compelled to go to arbitration, which is an expensive endeavor for the consumer, thus limiting their ability to stand up for their own rights, Honourable Speaker, and that's what we're fighting against. Mr. Speaker, imagine John, a senior in Trail, who purchases a high-end electronic device from an online retailer. Now, John's an elderly gentleman, and John is lonely. And when someone comes to his door to sell him something, it's a chance to talk. It's a chance to connect. And John does that. But we know that there are unscrupulous practices that happen in these situations, and seniors are being taken advantage of and buying things they can't afford because they feel pressured and because they're kind. They're trying to be kind. Well, this also addresses that, Mr. Speaker. Consumers will have clearer processes for cancelling contracts under specified conditions, ensuring that they're not trapped in unwanted agreements. This makes it easier for consumers to make decisions based on their current needs, not being pressured, and without the risk of difficult or confusing cancellation policies. In addition, this gives consumers additional access to the Civil Resolution Tribunal, the CRT. Consumers will have more accessible and streamlined process for resolving disputes through the CRT. This offers a faster, more affordable, and consumer-friendly option for resolving issues without having to go through lengthy, expensive court processes. Mr. Speaker, the best way to ensure that British Columbians are protected online is by informing them of their rights as a resident of our province. And that's why this new legislation includes increased consumer awareness initiatives, ensuring that consumers are better educated on their rights and what to look out for when entering into contracts. It also improves enforcement measures to help tackle predatory business practices and unscrupulous practices, ensuring that businesses who engage in unfair or deceptive practices are held accountable. So to conclude, these proposed changes signal a strong commitment to fairness and affordability in British Columbia, giving consumers the tools that they need to make informed decisions in this changing landscape. As consumers gain greater protections and access to resources to resolve disputes, this will ultimately foster a healthier, more transparent marketplace where businesses are held to high standards. The vast majority of businesses in British Columbia are already there. The amendments to the BPCPA are a vital step forward in ensuring that consumers in British Columbia can feel secure, respected, and empowered in their interactions with businesses, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Noting the hour, member, adjourn the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call adjournment of the debate.
Member, you heard the question to adjourn the debate. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Acting Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
You heard the motion to adjourn the House. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned until 1 p.m. today.